Entering a country store, Joe couldn't help but notice a sign posted on the glass door. Beware, danger of dog. Inside the store, Joe noticed a harmless hound dog fast asleep on the floor near the cash register. Joe asked the store's owner, "Is that the dog the sign warns about?" "Yep," replied the owner, "that's old Jake." Joe couldn't help being amused, and so then he said, "Well, Jake certainly doesn't look like a dangerous dog. Why'd you put up that sign?" The owner explained, "Before I posted that sign, my customers kept tripping over poor old Jake." The journey of life. It's filled with obstacles waiting to trip us. John, a pastor, writes about having lunch with one of his parishioners. During lunch, John began to talk about the rather unusual birthday gift he had just received from his daughter. She had given him a glue gun. A glue gun is a pistol-shaped tool that has an electrical heating element inside it that acts something like a soldering iron. Glue cartridges are inserted into the glue gun, something like a 6-shooter, and then those tubes of glue are heated so that the glue becomes uncongealed and flows easily out the end of the barrel onto whatever surface is to be bonded. John was explaining that he really wasn't much of a handyman. He didn't know what in the world he was going to do with his new glue gun. He jokingly suggested that perhaps he could take the glue gun with him when he performed wedding ceremonies and maybe somehow zap the bride and groom so that their bond would indeed last till death do they part. Or he said, maybe I could use the glue gun when I receive new members into the church to cement their commitment to Jesus Christ and his church. Now, the parishioner was a realtor, and he quickly entered the light-hearted conversation by saying, boy, he could use a glue gun in his line of work. The realtor explained that half of his time was spent making sales. The other half of his time was spent trying to keep those sales from coming unglued. Along the journey of life, there were times when all of us could use a glue gun to help us hold together. The Apostle Paul could have used a glue gun back in his day. Paul established churches all throughout Asia Minor and then spent much time and effort trying to keep those churches from coming apart. The New Testament epistles, Paul's letters to these new churches, reveal all the effort and energy Paul had to expend trying to keep those new churches from literally coming apart. Every congregation seemed to have within it a faction which threatened to pull it apart. The text today for our focus, the first chapter of Colossians, the 17th verse. Paul uses the phrase, in him, meaning in Jesus Christ, all things hold together. Other translations of Colossians 1:17 read, in him all things cohere, they all in Jesus hold together. In Jesus all things subsist. All things unite in Jesus. Paul knew, and Paul affirms that Jesus is and Jesus was that marvelous bond, that glue that holds the church together. For Paul, the living Lord Jesus Christ, who died to redeem his people, is also the glue, the unifying principle of all life. In our modern day of non-stick marriages, fractured families, disintegrating relationships, and other commitments that come apart, we need a strong reminder. A reminder that the God of this universe is needed more than ever to hold things together. Pick up in the newspaper and just read the headlines about the chaos and the trouble all throughout the world. That should certainly reveal to us the need for God's presence to help hold things together. The movie Rain Man, winner of several Oscar awards just a few years ago, tells a story of an idiot savant, a term which describes a victim of severe autism. Dustin Hoffman plays the part of Raymond, which is corrupted into the nickname Rain Man, a victim of autism who nevertheless possesses prodigious intellectual power. Raymond can memorize the phone book and then accurately repeat all those numbers in succession. When I saw that movie, I was fascinated by the many little things Raymond did to keep his world from falling apart. Raymond had to have his bed at a certain place in the room every night. His bed had to be next to the window, whether in his own bedroom at home or in a motel. Raymond always ate the same foods. Raymond always watched the same TV programs. Any deviation from the normal routine would upset Raymond. His world would fall apart. He came unglued, as his brother said in that movie. Some of us can probably easily relate. We don't handle change very well. Anything out of the ordinary, any interruption in our normal routine, anything unexpected or unanticipated can almost cause us to come unglued. Some of us blow our top at even minor interruptions. If we're watching a favorite TV program and the phone rings or the doorbell rings, we grumble and we fuss because we're being disturbed. Or if we plan a particular day trip and that same day the car chooses to literally come apart, we too almost fall apart at the inconvenience. And then, of course, we have all those serious interruptions of life. The death of a loved one, an emergency operation, a divorce, a friend diagnosed with cancer, a financial setback, a good friend or someone whom we highly respect does something immoral or illegal. When these major interruptions occur, what do? Do we come unglued? We do, unless our faith in the Lord Jesus Christ holds us together. The world literally and realistically fell apart for Frank and Elizabeth when Ted, their only child, was killed by a drunken driver. Ted was 18 years old, the very light of his parents' lives. After Ted's death, Frank and Elizabeth had one purpose in life: to haunt the driver who had killed their son. For the first 2 years after Ted's death, all they could think about was revenge, vengeance, justice. Just a few days after the burial of their son, they attended the preliminary court hearing for the driver, Tommy, who was just a couple of years older than their son. Frank and Elizabeth hated Tommy. They wanted to see him punished severely. Tommy was not sent to jail, as the grieving parents had hoped. Instead, he was sentenced to 5 years probation. The terms of that probation required Tommy to work every weekend, so many weekends, in an emergency room, where he would see firsthand the results of drunken driving. Every other weekend, Tommy was required to spend one night in the county jail. Frank and Elizabeth were enraged. It was a light sentence, so they thought. They decided to make sure Tommy fulfilled the requirements of the judge's order. The nights Tommy was supposed to be working in the ER, they were there to make sure he was there. Those nights he was to spend in the county jail, they would show up there to make sure he was there. Tommy was then caught by a probation officer while drinking. Tommy was then ordered to serve a sentence of 10 years. Somehow, Frank and Elizabeth experienced a change of heart. They began to visit Tommy in the jail. They were even able to negotiate permission for Tommy to be released to them 2 nights a week to go to church with them. Frank and Elizabeth made a decision. They were going to help change Tommy's life, change his life for the better. At first, it was awkward, uncomfortable. But one night, Tommy broke down and asked their forgiveness. Frank and Elizabeth were ready. They granted Tommy their forgiveness. And a few months later, defense lawyers asked the court to free Tommy on probation. This time, Frank and Elizabeth were again in the court, but they were there as Tommy's advocates, as his ambassadors. They assured the court that they would help Tommy rebuild his life. Frank and Elizabeth made a marvelous discovery. Hatred pulls life apart. Love holds life together. I affirm to you, love is the glue which holds together a husband and wife, parents and children. Love is the glue that holds together a pastor and the congregation. Jesus is God's gift of love to you and to me. Jesus went to the cross, again, for you and for me, so that we can experience God's marvelous, wonderful, unconditional love. I affirm all of us need spiritual glue. If your family is coming apart, if your life is coming unglued, I point you to the Lord Jesus Christ, who does hold all things together. Please pray with me.